Hey everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5-Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Hello, Rush Nation, and welcome along. It's been a long 7 months, 8 months, I guess, since the fantasy season ended, but we are finally here. We are on the cusp of week 1. All the hard work, advice, strategy, tips and techniques we've been giving you over the last few weeks and months should all start paying dividends soon. Murf, how are you, sir? You well?
Sorry, I was getting the message out. Yeah, I'm all good. Yeah, week 1, baby. I did the week 1 waiver wire show earlier and I was like, oh my word, it really is here. Like, it always hits me when I do that show in particular, over any other over the last sort of 5 years. That's when I think, oh, it's back, baby. It's back. I'm looking forward to getting the last couple of drafts in the books as well, because I've not got many left. And I worked out last night, depressingly, I've drafted on 176 of the last 177 days.
Wowzers.
I can't, at this point, I'm at like draft fatigue. Like last week, I called it Hell Week because I had like 18 different drafts that were going at any one time, and it was pretty ropey. But we got through a lot of them.
I'm kind of done with fantasy drafts. I'm now just edging off, maxing out my last bit of best ball, DraftKings stuff, things like that, just to get something a bit nearer. So
yeah,
the bulk 100%. Of everything else is done. So, and I've spent them out. They've been started since April, May time.
Best ball I was kind of done with by June. I think the only best ball I've done since is Charity League best balls. I just did the XFT draft, and that's best ball. That was good. I did well in that draft. I feel it was one of my better drafts this off season. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah, I'm down to my final 3 drafts. I got one tonight, which is a fast draft, and then I got a home league draft, which is a slow draft. It's been going on for over a week, and I've got 1 pick. I've got Mr. Irrelevant in that one, so I probably won't pick till tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then we have our listener league, our last one, which is standard, which we're going to do a fast draft on Wednesday. So there's some spaces left in that. If you are interested in that, do get involved. I've got a few guests. Oh, my word, Nate.
Evening, Jack.
Nate, Mason. Mace is in the house, and San Fran. How you doing, Mace? And Nate Booming. Here we go. Everyone's excited. The whole gang's together.
Football season is back, right?
It really is. And I'm very excited for this football season. And 5 years as well, we've got a lot of great content. We've got a lot of new writers this off season. So it's I've taken a step back from writing on the site to give others an opportunity to do their thing. I'm going to be doing some things on Substack. I had planned to write somewhere, and then I haven't put this out publicly, but I'll say on here that I'm not writing with Fantasy Pros in season. I'm writing with them out of season. Okay. So I'm done with them for the next couple of months. I will be back for them in 2023, but not currently. And I was thinking about this and was thinking, do I want to take an opportunity? I got offered a couple of opportunities to write somewhere, but I actually think about it. I've written fantasy football content non-stop for, I think, about 20 months with no real break. Multiple books in there. With the books, I wrote over 30 articles in the off season for Fantasy Pros. Plus other bits and pieces I've written elsewhere as well.
Did you a break
last season? Yeah, and last season I wrote like 45-50% of the content that went on the site, maybe even more, all through the season. So yeah, I feel like a little break from week to week writing is good. I'm going to do some bits and pieces on the Substack that I'll write. Maybe some stuff on the site if Rob will let me. I've handed the reins over to him, so if Rob lets me write some stuff on the site, I might even do that.
But as I say, even if you don't, there's awesome teams across both the redraft, the dynasty guys. There'll be waiver wires and start sit ideas coming your way, and injury reports, I'm sure. And somebody's gonna have to wake up the DFS guys because I guess they're gonna have to kick into action sooner rather than later.
The DFS guys are ready. We've been speaking all day. They're good to go. They're going to be back Thursday nights. The DFS show's back Thursday nights. I don't think there's going to be written content this year. Okay. So for those that don't know, I don't really play DFS all that much. Mark and I wrote the DFS content. I wrote kind of the basis of it, the players who I thought were good DFS picks. I don't know how relevant that was. We're not doing that this year. They're also going to change the platform they're talking about. I'm going to let them talk about it. It's their thing. So there's some changes to the DFS show, but I'm pleased to say that Nick and Mark are coming back. They've also got a third that's going to be joining them, which is amazing. So I'm really pleased. We've got all the shows going. We've got Fast Action Fridays. Fast Action Friday. That's the new pod with Rob and Lewis. They're going to be doing it. I think Pitsy's going to be potentially joining in as well.
Nate's there with his IDP in the week.
Nate's got all his IDP content, and he's doing some great things for Fantasy and Frames.
College guys must have had their week 1 last week and their excitement. And what a weekend of college football too. Did you watch that?
Let's not talk about this. Well, we could talk about the Gators, but that's, I know Jack's watching, and I've got to do it. Maybe the Knowles are 2-0, so maybe he's in a good mood to talk about college football for a change. Ricky Seals Jones is not questionable. Should I get him a week? Well, got 20 notifications. Let me know he was healthy yesterday. Didn't he get cut?
I'd wait another 10 days because there's probably another 60 notifications coming, and he'll be in and out as he has been for the last 4 days, I think. So,
but he's not on the team, is he? I'm pretty sure he's a free agent. He is. He's a free agent. He got cut.
No, then, Jack. My expert advice to you would be don't pick him up.
Yeah, he got an injury settlement. Yeah. I thought he got cut. It's all about Daniel Bellinger now. Daniel Bellinger season. Join in, Jack. Jack, come on, you should know that. We'll ride the Daniel Bellinger chain. Don't say Sleeper just told me he was healthy. Well, that's good. I'm glad he's healthy while he's got an injury. I think this is a sleeper algorithm for you. I think because he got cut from an injury settlement because he was on IR and now he's not officially on IR because he's been cut. I still think he's poorly. Maybe we all get together and make him like a get well card. I don't know.
I'm sure he's
is that sort of thing?
Better after. I'm sure he cashed that check and felt way better afterwards.
So. Yes. Well, it depends how much he got paid off. I don't know. Like injury settlements aren't as good as they should be, really. But we're well in the weeds here. Just thinking of a 5 stars. So Stacey published his waiver wire article. I mentioned this on the waiver wire pod earlier. So Stacey's going to be doing the column. I'm doing the pod. They're not the same pick. So last year you got me doing the column and the pod was basically an extension of the column.
Yep.
And it was like, did that really work? I don't really know. So we're going to give you 2 different perspectives from 2 different players. And I think that gives you a bit more of a well-roundedness of players available. So you'll get more people to choose from, but you also get
have enough free advice, mate.
I think differing opinions is good. So Stacey will have his approach. I'll have my approach. I'm not saying one is better than the other at all. I'm just saying that they're different. And I think that will help shape, and more information is better. And I think having that spread of information, but in the waiver wire pod every week, I'm going to link to Stacey's column. So,
cool.
And what we're also going to do, we're going to get some of the writers on this year who have written, and we're going to get them on this show, and we're going to promote some of their work because a lot of people associate 5 Yard with me and Stocks and you and Rich and Liam, and there's actually about 15, 20 other people. That are part of it, that people kind of think, oh, well, maybe they wrote for 5 Yard, maybe they don't, or I've seen the odd thing pop up on here. But actually, we are a big family, like Mark and Nick and Nate and Hannah and Paul and this is the part where I get into trouble. And the other Nathan, Antonio, and Emerson. There's so many guys and girls, and that's the point. Is we want to showcase some of these writers through the weeks, and some of them are going to join the pod. I'm going to get my act together now. I've been sort of playing catch up with the illness and the leg stuff and start actually getting these guys booked in. And you're going to see some of these people front and center on this show over the next few weeks and follow them. They're great people with great advice and doing great work. And I'm proud for every single person that's writing for us. I'm just amazed and flabbergasted and humbled by the work that they put together in their own time.
There's such a contrast in strategy and mindset and so on as well, that even if you don't agree with one of them, the way they approach a certain situation, you'll find content within there that actually fits how you play the game.
I think that's such a bit. such a big part of it. And you've got to remember, right, that the best fantasy analysts are right 60% of the time, which means they're wrong 40% of the time, which means that actually the best approach is to get more than a few opinions. And what we're going to do at 5 Yard is give you a whole array of opinions. And as you said, you find what works for you. You know, my advice doesn't work for certain players, and that's absolutely fine. And it shouldn't, because there's more than one way to play the game. It's just down to how you want to play it. So it's an exciting time. I'm really amazed that it's 2022. It's September. It's
It's
week
going to
one.
start getting cold and dark very soon, and I can't wait.
It already is. But it's going to be a lot of fun, and that takes us nicely into talking about week one. So,
yeah.
The purpose of this show going forward, if you haven't tuned in before and you sort of picked us up in the off season, you've seen one of us or a couple of us around and whatever, and you've joined. Thanks for joining in the off season and sticking with us. This flagship show really is a kind of a bit of a review of the weekend's games, and then it's a in terms of from a fantasy perspective, what are some things that we picked up?
Yep.
Who are some players we're keeping an eye on for the following week? Some strategy advice. What are we doing in certain situations? And trying to get ahead of the game always. So, has there been a trend? Has there been a position where it was a clear bell cow that's now become a committee? Or
is Matt Stafford eating breakfast with Cooper Cup?
Those sorts of things. We bring you all the exclusives here, but we try and do the work for you so that you can pick the bones of what's happened at the weekend, do it with us, and then we give you the actionable advice. And we're going to have some great guests in the off season, in this season, not just writers, but we're going to bring some of the best in the business as well to talk through some strategy. So
awesome.
It's very much a strategic pod, this. Not just your fantasy review and who to pick, but what we're seeing through data, what we're seeing on the field, and giving you that insight. So
on that note, I asked on Twitter a little earlier for some questions guys have at this time of year, and we'll come on to them a little bit later on, but we're here. We're Monday, game one, Thursday night for us. What are you looking to do with your rosters now, Murf? Where are you at? What's the plan? What should people be looking for?
Well, it's a really good question. So, Joe Bond and I touched upon this last week, and it's about getting those rosters in shape. I think last week was your window to really exploit effectively an open waiver wire, where people weren't all that active. People were finishing off drafts. People were maybe doing some drafts. I don't know, but people weren't overly active in the leagues that were already running and had waivers open. And I think there was a window there last week to exploit. Let's just assume that window is shut, or maybe it's still
even yesterday and today, my notifications of people dropping people from their rosters, and I saw Ben Roethlisberger drop this morning.
There you go.
That guy hasn't been in 4 months.
Well, this is what I mean, and this is where But you know what? I'm marking down somewhere in a notepad who's dropped him now, because I know they're not switched on. Yep. Maybe if you're playing in a dynasty league with someone who is in that boat, now's the time to pepper those people with some trades, because now they're thinking, oh, my roster's not as good as I thought it was. I need to do some tidying up. And maybe you can exploit some value there and get some short-term players on their roster, and you can get some longer-term players on yours. So that's something I would be doing. I'd be exploiting situations from that. Who hasn't been active? Who can I potentially exploit into some trades? I think probably the most underutilized tool right now in redraft leagues and dynasty leagues is the IR. So we now have a list of players who are on the IR. And 100% load them up. They're extra spots on your roster. So Gus Edwards, Brian Robinson, these are the players that need to appear on your bench or on your IR spot, so depending on how many you've got. So what I was doing in drafts last week, and people were cottoning on if they were playing with me, I wasn't drafting a kicker. I was taking Brian Robinson. I was taking Gus Edwards, and then all I was doing, Michael Gallup. I was just putting it. Well, Michael Gallup's not on IR anymore, which is annoying. He's questionable.
He's been called out today. No, he's been gone out today, so you can now set that way. So you can put him on IR.
Oh well, there you go. I saw earlier he was still got a Q next to his name, but if he's gone back to an O, then he can go. Great. So I'm moving those guys onto my IR, and then I'm taking a kicker off free agency, because I've now just put extra players on my roster, which is what you should be doing, right? You're gaining an advantage by having extra players on your roster, and those guys could be out. And if they're out all season, if something goes wrong in their rehab, you lose nothing. So just That's the sort of stuff I'm doing right now. I'm trying to load my
And if you've
IR
now
with
met your
guys.
kicker requirements, if you picked a kicker up that you missed in the draft and so on, are you like I hitting handcuff running backs? Load up 2, 3, 4, whatever space you've got in your roster. Are you hitting running backs in there?
Yeah. At this point in the season, absolutely, I'm loading up on handcuff running backs. So I want to get. So for me, and also, and I talked about this on the waiver wire show. I want to get either players who are going to earn a role immediately or players who are handcuffed. So for me, there's two routes, and I've kind of spread this approach. I've been picking up people like Kenyon Drake, especially in leagues where I have Marlon Mack, for example. I've got him replaced with Kenyon Drake, straight like for like swap, because I think Kenyon Drake. We've seen what happens in Baltimore week 1. We saw this last year. We had no Edwards, we had no Dobbins. They had 2 guys out there. They let them play out, and who was going to be the hot hand, basically. And if given the choice between Mike Davis and Kenyon Drake, give me Kenyon Drake all day long. I don't think, if I'm looking at, I talked about this on the waiver wire show earlier, so if you've watched that, this is almost a bit of a repeat, and apologies because I'm even wearing the same shirt. Give me the player who has done it, who has proven that he is more of a dynamic talent. And Mike Davis isn't, he's a plodder. So there's that. Darrell Williams is another one in Arizona. I'm not sure what his role is yet.
I think Benjamin might come out ahead of him on that one.
could happen, but I'm not so sure. He was signed for a reason. Benjamin had that opportunity. If it was that dead cert, I don't think they go and pay someone like Darrell Williams the money they have. I'm not saying he's got big money, but he's got more money than just getting a rookie or getting someone off a practice squad. It makes me intrigued that I don't think everything is set there with Eno, which makes me think, what is Darrell Williams going to be? And listen, you can take a punt now because you can get him for $0 in your fab, or you can just add him to your roster. If he has a significant role, let's say he has a flex role, a flexish role week 1, then all of a sudden he's intriguing because he's got a standalone flex role potentially, but he's also a good handcuff to James Conner, who we know gets hurt.
Yeah.
That intrigues me. That's someone I kind of want on my roster. But if he's not, then I'm happy to just cut him next week. It's not a big problem.
Well, our 5-yard Dynasty Listener League, the guillotine just finished up today. And I've literally done this in practice. I drafted Michael Gallup towards the end. I've stuck him on IR now. He went to out. Yeah. It's only a 5-spot bench, and all 5 are minor running backs. Sonny Michel, Eno Benjamin, Chris Evans, Rashad White, and Travis Homer. Because all of them could be starters going into week 2.
Mason just asked a question. Do you feel Alexander Mattison will be traded? Is he capable of starting elsewhere?
2 questions. No, yes. I don't believe he'll be traded. He is probably good enough to start somewhere.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if he is. I think Alexander Mattison is the product of a great system. That doesn't exist anymore, by the way. That system's gone, right? Mike Zimmer, the offensive coordinators, are all gone. It's cleaned house in Minnesota. Are we that confident that system is like everyone was saying, like, oh, Mattison, he's the premium handcuff. Is he the premium handcuff anymore? I'm not sure. I haven't drafted him anywhere because I'm not convinced that we're looking at Minnesota. People are looking at Minnesota like it's the Minnesota of the last 3 years. Not convinced that's going to happen. I think they're going to throw the ball more. I think it's going to go. You look at where the weapons are on that field. You look at what they've got. They've got Phelan, Osborne, and they've got Jefferson. They've got great talent. You've got Irv Smith, who I know he's been injured and hurt, and he might get injured and hurt again. But you've got talent. I know we've not seen enough of it, but we know he's a talent. At least that. All the talent really is in the air. I know Dalvin Cook's a good player, but Dalvin Cook has always been asked to do too much, and he always falls apart by week 14.
By going to the throwing game might give Cook a bit of respite as well.
And that's key. And I think that Cook's workload will go down, but I think he lasts longer. And I think in the long run, he's a better bet than he would have been. He's not someone I've targeted this season. I don't think I've drafted Cook in a lot of places because I think people need to realize that he's not what he was in the last few years. That 1, a lot of tread the tire. 2, it's a different system. It's a different offense. I think they're going to throw the ball a lot more this season. But I think that helps Cook. And I think they should use someone like Mattison. That's why I don't see him getting traded. This is a long-winded answer to this. Is because I think they're going to use Mattison. I'm not going to say the Tony Pollard role because that's not going to happen. But I do think he gets an increased role behind Cook to protect him, to preserve him. Because the problem is Minnesota get to week 14, week 15, Cook's done. He's cooked. Literally cooked. He's done. He's finished. He can't do anything. And we've seen this time and time. He's either injured or he's completely out of gas. That can't happen. You need to manage that workload. We saw it with Pittsburgh last year. They managed Najee Harris's workload, thinking they're going to get into the postseason or get very close to it. They took a load off, and then they let him go again in the postseason. That's what Minnesota need to do. I think the new coaching staff and offensive scheme realize that. That's why I can't see him getting traded. I do think he is going to have a significantly better role, but I also going to caveat and say this is not the premium handcuff role that he had. He's someone I would have faded pretty much everywhere in all formats because I just don't see him getting those huge volume.
So you feel
touches.
like more backup backs. You are now more injury dependent on Madison becoming reliable.
I think injury. I think it's going to take multiple injuries for him. I think it's not just injuries to Cook. I think it's injuries to Cook, Smith, and maybe
Thielen.
one of the and Thielen. I think if that and that could happen. Like we're talking about very injury prone players. But if everyone's healthy, I don't see where. If Cook went down, I can't see Mattison getting 25 touches like he would have done in the past. I see him getting that sort of 15. I think maybe they bring another back in. They've got Abdullah there. I just don't know. I just, and I could be wrong here, right? And I'm just trying to read the tea leaves of what's going on with this team. But and this is it. When you've got a new coordinator, you have to reevaluate. You have to think about the team differently. We can't just look at the Minnesota Vikings with a new coaching staff, a new GM, new coordinators and think, oh, well, they're just going to run the same plan. They're not. They're going to do something different. We don't quite know what that is yet. And the first couple of weeks are going to really tell us. But yeah, long-winded answer. I don't think Mattison is the guy. And as for capable of starting somewhere, yeah, but at the same token, I think there's many guys that don't start that are just as capable. I think Kenyon Drake's capable of starting somewhere and he's not. So it's not really a massive endorsement.
No. Fine. So week 1, check your rosters. IR whoever you can IR. Pick up your kicker.
I think
pick up running backs looking for injuries.
Yeah, they're the key ones, really. I think, as you say, we're loading with handcuffs. And I'm looking at guys who are going to walk into big workloads. So for me, Deonta Foreman, Matt Breida, these are the sorts of guys that are free on your waiver wires right now. They are the ones who are there.
Well, I have a lot of Deonta Foreman, but
well, yeah, so do I, and I have a lot of Matt Breida. And then listen,
I don't,
and I've paid nothing for them. And at the end of the day, if it doesn't pan out, I don't really care. And that's fine. Like at the end of the day, you're taking lottery tickets. And this is all about, if you've ever read the Fantasy Football Playbook, if you haven't, it's still on sale. Do go and buy it, even if you've done your drafts. I talk a lot about having rotational roster spots, right? For me, you've always got to have two guys that you can cut quite easily, right? If things don't work out, I think you've always got to have that. The worst scenario you can be in is it's people who I smashed my draft, and then you've got guys who you can't drop, but you're never going to play them. It's like fantasy purgatory. You end up having guys like Kenny Golladay. It's the perfect example of a player who lives in fantasy purgatory, where you're in a shallow league, you've got Kenny Golladay, you never feel good about starting him, but you never want him to drop him because you don't want anyone else to have him in case it goes off.
And if you're looking at projections on Sleeper this year, it's Zay Jones at the minute. Zay Jones is projected like 13 points week 1.
Yeah, ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, I don't mind people taking a punt on Zay Jones, right? Take a punt on him. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, I quite like Zay Jones. I've got him in a couple of deep leagues. I think fine. But if it doesn't work, you've got to move on from these players. Regardless of who you are, regardless of where you drafted them. You can't live in fantasy purgatory. That's one of the biggest mistakes that players make, is they get all these guys. AJ Green's a perfect example of a player who has put players in fantasy purgatory for years. I can't drop AJ Green because he's a Hall of Famer. He's about to be a Hall of Famer or whatever. I can't drop him. But he's doing you absolutely no good on the bench. You can't have players like that. For me, It's fine. You start with these guys. If it doesn't pan out, you cut them, you move on. What if they do something elsewhere? Who cares? Doesn't matter. As long as you've got someone who's come in and replaced and is doing something, even if it's 1 week, even if it's 1 week and they do something significant, it's worth it. Because you were never, ever going to put the player sitting on your bench, and you've got to be ruthless. Like, you have to be so ruthless and look at that roster and think, if it doesn't pan out, can I cut this guy next week?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you cut Josh Allen. I'm not saying you cut, your studs. There are obviously clear players in your first 5 rounds who you're likely to keep most of the season, unless something drastically goes wrong or happens, whatever.
Yeah.
But the players in like round 8, people get really attached to them. Like for me, if Brandon Cooks didn't do it in Houston, and then I doubt this is going to happen, but here's a random example.
Yeah.
But let's say he didn't, I'd cut him. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, you've got to move on from players or trade him. You've got to do one of those things. Do not leave yourself in fantasy purgatory. Do be ruthless with your roster. So I start identifying those players. And if you're starting to get the feeling, I don't know if I could chop him at any point, then you're in, like, you've got to get in that mindset of being able to drop him. You really have, because you've got to have 2-3 spots that are continually rotation. Like, for me, if I look at a league at the end of the season and I don't have the most transactions, I've not done it right.
And this is where you can counter an average draft or a poor draft week in,
100%.
week out, and make the difference up. We spoke even just last season how I think both of you and I had scenarios where we were 0-5, 1-6, something like that. And it's about turning. And you only need to get lucky once or twice for it. And you will, if you play the number of averages and the laws of the game, you will find one. And I think in both of our scenarios, both of us went on to make the playoffs in those leagues, in those situations. And this is where you can't win a league at a draft. You can't lose a league at a draft. It's about the ongoing.
I think you can lose the league at a draft. I don't think you can win one at a draft. I do think you
probably
can.
Could lose a league at a draft.
I think you can put yourself in such a hole. But at the same token, I always think you've got a chance. There's enough starter replacements on the waiver wire through the season, especially in a standard redraft league. Now we're getting into a deep league, a Scott Fishbowl 20. Someone posted a question in a 106 chat earlier about, do I go and get Pacheco or Likely off the waivers? And I was saying, no, you don't, because you're going to need every one of those $100 fabs for when someone comes up and it's worth it. You're going to have to blow the whole lot in one go. And the reason why is it's a 22 roster league. It costs 12 people. It's over 260 players.
Yeah.
The chances of you finding a starter level replacement, there's about 8 or 10 a season. So you have to, and there's 12 players in your league. So it's much harder because the depth is gone.
Yeah.
Whereas in a standard redraft league, you're looking at about 160 odd players get drafted. There's an extra 100 players, 90 players in the pool to pick from. So the start level replacement goes up. The Elijah Mitchells of the world of last year. We've had the James Robinsons. We've had, so many players over the years have come through. Mike Davis himself. Exactly that. There's so many players that come through that become starter level replacements due to injury, due to whatever happens. And if you don't have the roster spots to pick these people up and you don't make the moves, you can't win. You could draft the best team in the world. I could draft an average team. And if you gave me the free run of the waiver wire, I'll beat you. I just will.
Comparable.
Because I'll have more players to pick from. And if I've got more players to pick from, I'm more than likely to hit, as you say, those lottery tickets, those key players, because I just need you to have one off week and I need to have one good week and you're eliminated. And that's, that's the beauty of it. So, for me,
there's vampire leagues that do this, right? There are vampire leagues where 11 people draft and one just chooses the waivers. And they're competitive.
And the amount of vampires that end up winning it, I've seen it so many times because they get that run of waiver wires and then they end up stealing a few players off people's rosters and then the train leaves the station, it's game over. And I think when I think about tips that I could give people now, week 1, right? If you want to win your league, especially a league of record, right? A league that matters to you above all else. You've got to outwork everybody. You've got to have more transactions than anybody. You've got to have picked up more players than anybody. You've got to have done more trades than anybody. That's how you win, right? That is single-handedly about 80% of it. The other 20% is picking the right players. Things like this podcast, we will help as long as with other analysts out there. We will help you.
As long as
But you've got to pick up the right players. You've got to pick up players. That's half of it. Even if they're the wrong players, you still got to pick them up.
Yeah, there's always trying to think ahead, isn't there? There's always a look at the situation. We banged the drum for Benny Snell over Najee Harris a little bit last year, which didn't quite come to fruition, but the thought process remains the same. It's let's have a look. Not who did well last week and go and get them, because Monday morning, Tuesday morning,
it's too late.
Everybody's lumping in 100 farb on that one guy, right? It's about having a look ahead all the time.
I mean, look, I got the Benny Snell take wrong. I was right about the workload dropping off.
You would.
So I was halfway there. I just thought they'd use Snell more. It didn't happen. That same process, though, told people to trade or get rid of Aaron Jones, and then he ended up getting injured. But that was after we gave the advice, and people did trade him, and we're like, we're grateful that we got that one done. But it's the same reason why you managed to get ahead and pick up Darrell Williams, for example, was a league winner a few years ago in Kansas City. When Kareem Hunt got cut,
how many of us went into championship games last year with Dario Gumbawali starting?
Exactly,
because we got ourselves in that position, right? I did. And
we were so early on the Rashard Penny. And I mean, we're not trying to toot our own horn here, but we were so early on the Rashard Penny train. It was scary how early we were. We were one of the first to really be out there and say, "Go get Rashard Penny. This situation's opened up now." And then all of a sudden, it really opened up, and he won you a league.
But that process is because of what we saw. That was because of the situation, and it's about looking and realizing what the situation is, and that would have meant it could be any team or any player. It's about spotting that pattern and process coming through.
And this is it, right? So the level of fantasy question I get is typically, look at my roster, who should I start? Are you there? I think you're in this. A bit slow. You there?
I am here, but I don't know if you can hear me.
I can, yeah. He just sent it off me. The level of fantasy question I get is, I've got these players who should start. And it's actually almost the wrong question, right? I get why people get so hung up on start sits, right? I get it.
We've got a few of them coming.
And I got 5 years of start sits podcasts and 5 years of articles. Right, I get it. I get why start sits are important, but it's almost the wrong question. The questions you need to ask yourself is, how do I? And you've got to ask this question Sunday night, Monday morning. How does my roster get better this week? Yeah, but how does my roster get better this week? That's the question you've got to ask yourself before you get it better on Sunday, first thing on a Monday. How does my roster get better this week? And that's what's key.
Well, we'll come on to them. We've got some listener questions in that I asked for earlier, and we've got both mixes of those in there. So we'll be able to see what a conventional start sit question is, and we'll advise as best we can. And we'll have a look at how others have worded questions to try and actually take advantage of a broader spectrum here. So should we get into them?
Let's get into them.
Super. So the first one I've got is from Steve, who is at Trader Tennessee on Twitter. He's got, "Hi guys, curious who you think I should sit week one. He looks like he's got 4 wide receivers and a running back, and he needs to fill 2 wide receiver spots and a flex. So he's got Stephon Diggs, Amon Ross and Brown, Darnell Mooney, Brandon Cooks, and then the running back that could fill the flex is Elijah Mitchell.
Right.
2 wide receivers and 1 flex to come from that.
Okay.
What are your thoughts?
Look, start your studs. So Diggs is locked, right?
Yeah.
Got to lock yourself. Right, you start your studs. First piece of advice to give to anybody is start your studs. If you drop them in the first, second round, you have to start them. It's almost like nailed on. If you're asking me a start sit question about should I start Cooper Kupp this week, I'm not even going to answer it. You don't draft a guy in the first round and to ask a start sit question about him, right? Same goes to the second round. So no, you start Diggs. You draft him, you have to start him, right?
Correct.
So then you've got Amon-Ra St. Brown, Mooney, and Cooks, right? The one I would sit, and this will surprise people, is I'd sit Cooks.
Oh.
The reason I'd sit Cooks, it's not player or talent, it's the matchup, right?
Yeah, Colts.
So I'm locking Mooney because who else is catching passes on that roster in week 1?
Yeah.
There's no one.
Cole Kmet,
no one.
Maybe.
Cole Kmet. Yeah, Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet's going to catch passes there. I look at their matchup. And I think it's not the worst matchup, not necessarily the best matchup for the Bears. They got the 49ers.
Yeah.
It's a good D. I'm not going to say it's an elite D. It's a good D.
Yeah.
I think Mooney's good enough to make plays on those corners. I think he's good enough to get peppered a lot and get volume, right? So I play him as my.
So Mooney
my
and Diggs are two
two
receivers.
Yeah, all day long. So now
So
the
you've now
question goes
got
to
Amon-Ra, Cooks, and Mitchell to fill your flex.
right. So
we're together, just to let you know, on those receivers. We're together.
Right.
I wonder how we'll differ out.
There's a case to. Okay, so there's a case for. Let's rule out Cooks and explain why I rule out Cooks. Cooks for me is at the bottom of this list, and the reason why is purely matchup. They got the Colts. Colts, very sophisticated team, very good defensively, very good defensive unit. When you're sitting there and you're thinking about how the Colts are going to beat the Texans, one, you've got a not really overly established running back with not a brilliant offensive line. Mm-hmm. So you've got Damian Pierce in there. He's going to have a bit of volume, but he's not going to get 20, 30 touches in this game. Colts are going to go ahead early. We're thinking game script. They're going to go ahead. They're going to manage the game. It's going to be almost a bit like a Swiss Army knife, very precise, precision kind of football. So I don't think Damian Pierce is a huge factor in this game. So then you're thinking, right, well, they've got to put the ball in the air. Now, I think I look at the Colts and think about how they're going to scheme. I think they're going to scheme a lot of zone and a lot of double coverage on Cooks. And I think they're going to say, if you want to go and get yardage, you can have it on Collins. And I think they're going to play containment football. And I think they're going to let Collins get a lot of those sort of 10 to 15-yard options. Because the other thing with the Texans is there's no real tight end. People talk about Brevin Jordan. They tried to trade him.
They've signed O.J. Howard.
They've just signed O.J. Howard, but they've just signed him. So he's not up to speed with the playbook. He's done 0 reps with Davis Mills. He's not going to get the volume with one. So that tells me that Brevin Jordan is out. He's on the way out. So they're not going to use Brevin Jordan all that much. We know that O.J. Howard is likely to be phased in at some point, but he's not ready. So now we're really starting to get the picture here of where the ball's going to go. It's going to go to Nico Collins. And I think but exactly that. I think they're going to give him very safe. Do you want 12 yards on Nico Collins? Fine, you can have your 12 yards. And what we'll do is we'll stonewall you in the red zone. And that's how I see
that 8 times
to
get down the field. Yeah.
And I think that's how they're going to play this game. And I think they're going to. And I'm not saying Cooks isn't going to get his, but I don't think he's going to have this. I can see a target line of like 5 for 60 for Cooks. I think that's the sort of line I'm kind of expecting from Brandon Cooks.
So where'd you go then? Cooks is out.
So Amon-Ra St. Brown's got the Eagles. They're at home. They've been on Hard Knocks, a lot of exposure. I think he's the ceiling play. So I think if I'm looking at ceiling, I'm thinking about I'm projected to be behind in the matchup, or it's not projected to be very close.
Yeah.
Right. Then I'm probably going St. Brown because I want the ceiling play.
Yeah.
If I'm projected to win the matchup by quite a significant margin, it looks pretty comfortable. And I know projections are projections, right? But if you're projected to win by 20, you
can never feel yourself though, looking down the rosters, right? Yeah.
Of course you're right. If you feel confident about the matchup, man to man, you think you got a good chance of winning it. I'm starting Mitchell to contain it because I think Mitchell has got the safer floor. I think he's going to have a decent game. I don't think he's going to have a huge game. I don't think he's going to put up like 180 yards and 3 touchdown kind of game. But I do think he's going to have a very fantasy relevant flex game. And I think he's easily got the safer floor. But if I wanted the ceiling play, I'm going St. Brown. Because I think St. Brown, again, I'm thinking familiarity, week 1, Chark's new on the team. I think he's going to be good. But it's week 1. They haven't had a lot of time. So I think for me, I look at the ceiling play, and I think the ceiling play out of those two is St. Brown. So it's down to where you are in your matchup. If you think you're going to win comfortably, I play Mitchell. If you're going to shoot for the moon, I play St. Brown.
That was my mindset. My mindset was 2 wide receivers that should score the most there, Diggs and Mooney, straight in. The other flex spot comes to me about how you're set on the game and the matchup as a whole. Yeah. I differ slightly. Yeah. I would have took Amon-Ra as the ceiling play. And I'd actually take Cooks, because even if Cooks has a bad day, you're still going to accept him to get 5 catches, 60 yards, and maybe a score. And I think if you are looking at a 15, 20-point win, that may just tip you over.
Yeah, and that is a likelihood. I can understand. I could buy that logic 100%. I just think for me, if you ask me who's got the safer floor out of Mitchell and Cooks, I'd go Mitchell because I think he's got the nailed-on volume. There's no one behind him that's. they opened up the whole back row, like who's going to be the number 2, and really no one won the role.
They've got
Which
Jeff
says
Wilson,
to me,
injury prone, Tyrion Davis-Price, rookie, and I can't remember the game. The other guy, undrafted rookie as well.
yeah, and at the end of the day, no one really grasped the backup role. So it says to me that Mitchell's going to get a decent amount of workload early, at least. And I think, again, they'll want to run the clock. If you look again, you think of the game script of that game against the Bears. I think you'll see the 49ers go up early, and I think they'll try and manage the game. That will involve a bit of Mitchell. That's where I think he gets decent volume. But I can understand Cooks potentially as a floor play. I personally would lean Mitchell over Cooks week 1.
Cool. Next one's a similar question, more running back based. So this is Rob at Rob_LS67. My running backs are Eckler, Dobbins, Drake, James Cook, Mattison, and Ken Walker. If Dobbins doesn't make it, or he does, but he's on a snap count, who is playing as my second running back? So I guess he's assuming Eckler start your studs, no doubt.
Yeah.
Dobbins is out. Let's take that. I'm going to say Ken Walker's probably going to be out week 1 as well.
Yeah.
So that then leaves us with Drake or James Cook or Mattison. And I'm going with Drake.
I mean, yeah, 100%.
I think we mentioned that a little bit earlier on, right?
Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that it's a tough situation to be in if Dobbins is out. But yeah, I'm starting Kenyon Drake there.
James Cook's not going to get a big enough workload at the Bills at the Rams week 1.
He's got to earn it. Yeah, exactly that. That's not really a game I'd want to be relying too heavily on the running backs for.
No.
In that one, Mattison we've already kind of covered. So yeah, give me Drake out of those week 1. I think he's someone who could be a flex worthy player. It's a shame it's in your running back 2, not your flex, but I do think he puts flex worthy numbers up.
Decent flex if you have Drake there. If Dobbins does play, looking handy. So
yeah.
So they're conventional. What people will see as start sit questions and that type of thing, right? And that is all as well subjective. It's how you see it, how you feel it will go. These are our opinions based on in Murf's area, years of experience and studying and watching and learning, and mine not quite so much, but this is how we see it playing out. Everyone will have their own opinion. It's about listening to this, factoring that into your own thought process and finding that ground.
Yeah.
The next question we've got is from our very own 5-yard dynasty, Rich Dynasty Island. And it gives you an idea of how questions can be worded differently. So he's put, and Murf, this is for you. What players or situations are you monitoring in week 1 and intending to take advantage of?
Yeah, good question.
Because he's thinking ahead. He's already put that, intending to take advantage of. So he's thinking week 2 already. What are we looking for this week that I can steal a march on someone into week 2?
So I've already mentioned a few examples. So Darrell Williams in Arizona is one. I'm really keen to see how that situation plays. And I might be 100% wrong on that. But if he turns out, if I'm just trying to follow the logic of the team, right? And if the logic suggests that he's going to have a flex-worthy role in that team with the handcuff upside, I'm thinking that if he puts up a reasonable game, he's going to be a decent waiver wire ad. So if I can have him before I have to pay any money for him out of my fab, that's good for me. That's kind of what I want. So that's a situation I'm keeping an eye on. I'm keeping an eye on what happens in Baltimore. That's really obvious from multiple perspectives in Baltimore, right? What I want to see in Baltimore is what happens with the running back situation. I kind of think I already know from last season. They're going to run the hot hand. It's who has the better game on the day is going to get the more touches. Yep. So they're going to run a hot hand offense until Dobbins is fit and can take the workload. So that's one I'm watching. Is that still right? Or have I got confirmation bias based on what I saw last season? They are different backs. They have different skill sets. I'd argue Kenyon Drake was the best of all the backs that they've had recently. So that would be an interesting one just to see. Is it confirmation bias on my side, or is it going to play out differently? I'm also looking at the wide receiver side. So I'm looking at who's going to be the next reads. Is it Duvernay? Is it likely? Who is getting reads on that team outside of Andrews and Bateman? Because that third look is going to be really crucial, because the ownership level of that third look is virtually nil. Duvernay, less than 5% owned. Likely, less than 5% owned. Whoever it's going to be, Prochet, I doubt it's Prochet, but let's throw his name in the mix. Whoever it's going to be, that ownership goes up week 1. So maybe you want to take a punt. And I've been buying Duvernay on that role, but let's see
Duvernay's
what
15%
happens.
owned in redraft right now on Sleeper.
Well, there you go. So that's a situation I would be looking to exploit. So I'd be looking to sprinkle some Duvernay on. I've got him in quite a few places. He's a player I'd be sprinkling and having in places, thinking that's one way I can take advantage. Because if he ends up having a 5 for 80 in a touchdown game, guess what? He's going to be in everyone's waiver wire column next week. Don't be behind, be ahead. That's a situation I'm looking to exploit. There's a comment that came out of the Buccaneers today. Now, I kind of disregard coach speak when it comes to Buccaneers because it tends to all be garbage. But there was something about Fournette having a lesser role. Let's see if that's true. If that's true, who is getting it? Is it Gio? Is it Keyshawn Vaughn? Or is it White? Most people tend to think it's going to White. I don't necessarily believe it is, at least this early.
I'm not out on Gio, and he's one of those, as we spoke about, bottom 2-3 spots that I've got there just in case.
So that's what I mean. I think, that's a situation I'd be monitoring, looking to exploit if it's true, and it could just be complete. And listen, with the Buccaneers and coach speak, 9 times out of 10, it is complete garbage. So that's something I'm not really looking to exploit. I'm looking to see if it's true, and maybe there is an opportunity to exploit if it's anything different from the what we expect, what the status quo is. Wan'Dale Robinson, is he the starting slot in New York? And if so, what kind of volume he's getting? That's one I'm really keeping an eye on, because I think
my one would be Dotson in similar mold. Dotson or Samuel in Washington.
Yeah, that's another situation. The reason I say less so for me is because I'm not convinced that's an overly aerial attack as much as, say, New York is going to be. I think New York are going to sling it quite a lot. New York's a bad team, right? It's a bad team. They're going to be behind a lot. They're going to put the ball in the air. Washington, we know that D is really, really good. We know that D's good. It's a top 5-6 D, right? So we know if they're competitive and they keep the ball, time of possession in Washington is going to be really key. If they keep the ball well and they don't turn the football over, which is something Carson Wentz has been struggling with the last couple of years, and maybe that is they use safe plays like out routes, like slot routes to Dotson or Samuel or whoever it might be. I get the logic on that, but I'm thinking if I'm looking at the bigger picture and lots and lots of passes, lots of targets, what New York for me is one I've really got an eye on. What's the target distribution going to be? Again, new offensive coordinator, new coach, new scheme, new day. Could be the same old crap in New York, likely to be. But my point is they're going to be a bad team. They're going to have to throw the ball a lot. How much is Wan'Dale Robinson going to get? Don't forget this guy was a 2nd-round pick. People forget that about Wan'Dale Robinson. He was very highly drafted. So that's an area I'm looking to exploit, and he's a player I'd be picking up in a few places as well. Other examples to exploit, because look, everyone's gonna. The problem is not everyone. Try not to overgeneralize. People are going to be focusing on the big, great offenses: the Bills, the Rams, the Buccaneers. Do you know what? Most of those players are owned. So there's not much point in trying to glean an advantage, unless you're talking from a dynasty perspective. Very different. But from a redraft perspective, unless you're looking at a player like Isaiah McKenzie, he's someone I'm looking at the Bills. He's low owned. I think he's about 12% owned. He's someone that, does he get that wide receiver 3 job? If so, what does that look like? That's an area I might exploit.
So I'm also looking at Carolina on that same thing. DJ Moore's going to... How much is Anderson getting? How much is Rashard Higgins getting? They brought in. They've got Terrace Marshall there. They brought in Laviska Shenault. Who picks up that second wide receiver role?
Yeah, and that's an interesting one to watch as well, because my sneaky suspicion says it's going to be Higgins. I mean, I was, how much I was in on Robbie Anderson last year. I'm so out on him this year.
I'm hanging on to
that relationship.
I'm going to this time.
And that could happen. They paid him. It'd be interesting to see what happens. I think, that's an opportunity. I think you've got to look at teams that are going to throw the ball a lot. I think
Robbie Anderson's the most owned of all of them at 18%. So you can almost get any of those 4 off waivers.
Jacksonville's a really interesting one. James Robinson's been declared fit. James Robinson becomes a really nice, sneaky under the radar target now. because I think
Do you
about
think he might be on a
how.
snap count though early on?
Yeah, he will. But I look at the way that Doug Pederson runs his offenses. He's got two very good running backs there. He's going to run them both. I'm not saying there's a ceiling play there, but there's a very good floor play, flex play week to week with someone like Robinson. If an occurrence like the Liz Frank happens to Etienne, then it's James Robinson to the moon. The way I look at it is that a player like James Robinson is almost similar to how I kind of was describing what that Darrell Williams role could be, and a week to week flex play with the ceiling play with the handcuff. And I think that's what James Robinson's role is now. That is his role. He's a potential week to week flex play with premium handcuff status. Because if Etienne goes down, they're going to run that ball because that is what Pedersen does. He runs the ball but there is a low ceiling to whoever is there. So I'm not really in on Etienne. I think they're going to split a lot of the ball. Trying to think other situations you could exploit. I think the Chicago situation's there to be absolutely rinsed. Because if you take Darnell Mooney out of the equation, no one there is owned. You've got Justin Fields who's 45% owned. Everyone else, yeah, that's what I mean. That whole Chicago situation is there to be exploited. This offense is not going to be as bad as it was, right? It's not going to be as bad as it was. Matt Nagy's gone. They've got competent coaching staff there, competent offensive coordinator. For me, everyone in that offense, with the exception of Mooney, is under-owned. Fields at 45% is under-owned. He is easily a situation that can be exploited. We don't know who the wide receiver 2 is on that team yet. We think it's probably going to be who was the lad that was at Kansas City?
Were you on about the Bears?
Yeah.
What? So who's their wide receiver 2? Byron Pringle.
Byron Pringle.
St. Brown.
Yeah,
Smith on set. They put a few of them in.
So I think Byron Pringle is probably the guy to own there. But St. Brown is another one as well. Cole Kmet's criminally under-owned. I think they're all players that you can keep an eye on to exploit. And again, sprinkle on your rosters now if you've got the space. We're naming a lot of guys. This is what I mean. That is a whole situation that can be exploited and jumped upon, because I don't expect them to win week 1 as well. That's the whole point, is they've got the 49ers. I expect them to lose quite comfortably. But let's see who's got the volume.
Correct.
Let's see who gets the work.
Who's pick up the reps? Yeah.
They're the situations you want.
And you're not picking them because you're not going to waiver them next Monday because they have amazing games and everybody's in for them. You're picking them because they could have an amazing game week 2 if they pick up that same workload.
Week 2, week 3, week 4. You want to get ahead of the trend on these. So you want to see who's getting high snap counts, who's playing a lot, who's getting targeted a lot, who's running a lot of routes. They're the 3 things I look at, right? If someone's playing a lot but they're not running a lot of routes, it just says they're a blocker. I'm not that interested. But if they're running a lot of routes and not getting targeted, that says they're not running the routes properly, or they're getting heavily covered or blocked or schemed. So I want all those 3 things.
Or they just don't fancy it.
Yeah, or that as well.
So anybody kind of 60% snap route up is going to be viable, right?
Yeah, I'd want to see a bit more than that, but yeah, I'd be looking near 70. But it kind of depends on game-by-game situation and who's on the roster, especially those bad teams. Like I want to be seeing 70, 75, 80%. Like on the Bears, I'd want to be seeing an 80% snap count.
What are you looking at, like a 6-7 target type receiver?
I think the targets is almost subjective because you have to go by what the game was and the scheme, and how much they have the ball, how the other defense played. But I'm looking at how many routes they run. So if they run routes on, let's say they have an 80% snap count, they run routes on 95% of the snaps that they play, and they get 6 targets, that really interests me. Like, that really interests me. That's when I'm pricking my ears thinking.
Even if the 6 targets turns into a 3 for 28 yards, not worried 100%. About that at that stage.
No, absolutely not. In fact, it's almost better from under the radar perspective.
It'll be cheaper.
Yeah, exactly that. So never a bad thing. So yeah, there's some thoughts and mind processes, and there's some situations I think can be exploited. I'm sure there's many others, and there is. Effectively, for me, there's a situation on every single team I could probably conjure up and exploit. For example, I would be right now trying to shop Darren Waller absolutely everywhere if I had him, because I think he goes heaven. I think he literally crashes to the bottom this year. I think he literally, his value is going to literally plummet. by the week. And I think if you can get out on Darren Waller right now, that's the situation I'd be exploiting, because I don't have any of it.
Interesting.
I think maybe in one league, I'd cash out. What if you can get a decent price for him right now and try and sell the dream of, hey, he could be the next Gronk, and it works? I'm out. Like, cash out. Give me a second round pick next year. You can have Darren Waller. Cheers. I'd watch that, and I'll watch that stock plummet, because in 2 weeks' time, you're not going to get a third for him. In 5 weeks' time, you're not going to get a fourth for him. He's going to be a virtually worthless asset in about 100%. I think he is, and that's a situation I want to exploit. 100%.
Yeah, that's how we win this game. We always talk about little wins. Little wins make big wins, right?
So that's another one for Rich. It's probably not. I don't know if you're on that one, Rich, but if you are, then
I'm not sure if Richard agrees on Gallimore for a second, but I'll have to get on Richard's trade calculator and see how that pans out.
Yeah, do that.
Next question we've kind of covered off a lot. Andy at Royal Bear C on Twitter said, I'd like to know your views on drafting kickers and defenses, or just picking them up after. He's seen a lot of both, wonder what our views are on it. And we sort of spoke about it earlier, that if the situation is there to pick up another talent and fill your roster with a potential starter or somebody you can IR down the line, the difference in who you're going to draft at that spot for a defense or kicker to who you can pick up now on the waivers isn't a lot of variance, is there?
No, so I talk about this a lot. I talk about this a lot in the book, right? I have done for the last 3 years. So to give you some analysis on this, right? I've looked at the last 8 years worth of data. Kickers, the kicker 1 to the kicker 12 equates to about 2.5 points a game.
Yep.
It's about what it weighs out to be, right? It's not a great difference. People say, oh, well, I'll pay up for that difference. But if you're paying up 5 rounds in point differential value by round, that's a heck of a lot more than 2.5 points a game. Mm-hmm. The difference between the kicker 6 and the kicker 12 is about a point a game. It's about what you're paying. So not drafting a kicker should be the norm. Unless the only way I'd advocate drafting a kicker is twofold or three. 1, you're in a best ball, you have to, right? Fine.
Yep.
2, you're in a league that you're not overly invested in, right? What I mean by that is,
you can do it and I have to go back to it a little bit. Yeah.
You're in a league where you're just going to set a lineup, you're going to play, you're kind of overcommitted on leagues, you're not really all that into the league, you're probably going to leave it next year or whatever, right? But you kind of did it to fill some numbers, but you're not overly invested, and you think, you know what, I just want a kicker, I'll take one in the last round, and then I can just have a set and forget kicker. Fine, I don't have a problem with that. Everyone has a league like that, everyone has multiple leagues like that, fine. Or, you'd be drafting kickers this week because you're not planning to activate the waivers. You kind of just want to get your setup. I don't mind that, right? Week to go, if you're drafting kickers, I've done it in a couple of places. There wasn't the IR spots available or players to pick up on a IR. Fine. I don't have a problem with that. They're the only times I've drafted a kicker. Or I've been
or you're in a crazy league like you set up where there's start 2 kickers in a 14-man league.
Yeah, things like that. Or Scott Fish Bowl, where the scoring kind of advocates it.
The Flagship sort of
thing. Yeah, fine. So
cool.
I wouldn't do it because I wouldn't draft a kicker in a normal league in a more normal circumstance, because there's absolutely no reason to. There's no advantage to drafting a kicker versus not drafting a kicker. You've got more of an advantage of not drafting a kicker, because the chances of you hitting someone with that last pick that ends up becoming fantasy relevant actually outweighs the 0.5, 0.7 points per game that you might gain from drafting a kicker. And then if you can end up getting players who you can put on your IR spot and you end up having a large bench, you definitely will outweigh drafting a kicker. So it's just, for me, there's nothing about drafting a kicker that makes sense, unless it's in those stipulations I've talked about. So I wouldn't do it. DSTs are different. Now, historically, analysts, anybody analyzing team defenses are historically crap at it, right? Everyone's crap at it. I don't care what anyone tells me. The number one DST is the Buffalo Bills this year, right? That's on ADP. That's the number one DST. Yes. If they finish in the top 5, ADP this year, I will be shell-shocked.
Okay.
Because every year, a team that basically, a DST that never gets drafted ends up being a top 2 DST. Who was drafted in the Dallas Cowboys defense last year? Wasn't happening. Who was drafting?
Well, you talk about the Bills
that?
not getting in there. It was the same last year. It would have been the Rams. I think the year before that would probably have been the Bears.
The Buccaneers,
No,
Bears. No one ever repeats as the DST1. That happens.
Right.
So if you're drafting the Cowboys, if you're drafting the Bills, you might as well not bothered. I'm drafting defenses that have historically good finishes. And the three best
decent
ones are... Don't matter because we don't know who's good and who isn't. I mean, I've talked about it very loosely here for week 1, but over the course of a season, we don't know who's good and who isn't. You can sit there and analyze the strength of schedule and all of those sorts of things. I think you can spend too much time analyzing.
You have a feel for what teams are going to be sound and what teams are going to struggle.
But there's always a team that's going to be last in the division that finishes first. I mean, there's always going to be the odd surprise. You need 2 of those, and it completely changes the strength of schedule.
Fair.
I go with teams that historically finish high. And I mean, we're talking multiple years. If you're looking at the 3 best combined teams in DST scoring over the last 7 or 8 seasons, it's the Steelers, the Patriots, and the Ravens.
Yeah.
So, but I'll buy them.
Ravens and Patriots.
And with their ADP price, you can get them all in the last round. So you can take whoever you want to take, get one of those 3 in the last round. Do you know what? If you get it wrong, doesn't matter. The other strategy,
the Saints are probably just behind that, and
there's a bit of a drop off after there. Those 3 are historically well above everyone else. Now, the other school of thought is you could look at the first 4 fixtures and you could pick a streaming DST. The Titans, for me, look to have quote unquote the best. I mean, they got the Bills in there, which is a bit nasty, but the rest of it looks all right. I think they got the Colts, the Giants, and the. I've got it here.
The other one.
I got it here because I wrote it down earlier. The Raiders, which I think there's opportunities there to be exploited from the way that DST scoring is. So they're not bad. So you can either go for a streaming pick, or I just do what I do. I've just been picking the Steelers, the Patriots, or the Ravens because they're going to be just as good. They're going to be around about 4 to 8 this year. And that's all I need. And that's all I need from the position. Awesome. I just need to not lose from the position. And if they hit the jackpot like the Patriots did a couple of years ago, where they were 150 points over any other DST, then happy days. You're laughing all the way to the bank.
Super. Andy, I hope that helps. We've got one more, Murf. Martin at Lucky Fantasy Guy says, Week 1 PPR League, rank these receivers. We've got Waddle, Bateman, Sutton, and DJ Moore.
I haven't fully set my week 1. Waddle goes at the bottom because he's an injury risk.
And he's a wide receiver too. He's the only one there that's probably a wide receiver too on their team.
Potentially, I just think with the injury risk, how much is he going to play? I don't know. That's one for me I'm a bit unsure about. I'd probably put him last. And then I would probably go to... Sorry, I just had
I'm with you. Waddle last.
So now I'm looking at. I'd probably go with. Let me get the schedule up and let's see who's playing who because that's going to play.
Ravens have got Jets.
Yeah, so Bateman goes quite high just based on that matchup. I think that's a good one to potentially exploit.
Sutton's got the Seahawks, and DJ Moore with the Panthers will have the Browns.
Yeah, good one. I would probably go. Yeah, that's tough actually because they're all kind of near for me.
They are for me. They're very.
Yeah, they're very, very near. I think
rankings and so on. They're all in that same sort of bracket.
I think I'd probably go.
I've got DJ.
I'd probably go top. I'd go Sutton. I'd go Sutton, Bateman, or Waddle.
Oh, cool.
I just think Sutton's matchup is probably the best of the bunch.
Baker's going to want to show off.
I've lost you there. You there?
More Bateman Waddle for me. So we got that bit agreed.
You kind of broke up there for me, but I think we've agreed.
Sorry, man. We've agreed Waddle's bottom, and that's all that matters. Sorry, Martin.
So I'd go Sutton top, Sutton, Bateman, Moore, Waddle. That's my order.
No, we're out. I'm more Sutton, Bateman, Waddle. But hey, we
Okay.
agree on Waddle being bottom. That
But I think
from
they're
both of us
close.
would annoy Martin. That from all of us would
I,
annoy Martin. So we're okay with that.
I think they're close. I think the bottom line is you could kind of
Yep.
throw a blanket over the other three, and I think they're all
Correct.
within a reasonable range. That's a tough start set. Like for me, if someone sent that to me, and they have done, I think, well, I've really thought about that. But yeah, I play matchups. So because I think they're so close, but I'll do. Do you know what, Martin? I'll send you my rankings when I'm finished with them and I've gone through them for the week, and I will send them to you. And maybe I might change the order by then, and I've given it a bit more thought.
Fair. So last bit from us tonight. Is there any other key bits of advice that go through the season? I guess, but now we are here. We're into setting rosters, setting lineups. Any key bits of advice? I remember one that 5 Yard kind of had in a t-shirt at one stage that springs to mind.
Yeah, I've got that in the upstairs still. Yeah. Never flex on Thursdays. Don't ever put a flex. Don't ever put a player that's playing on Thursday night in your flex spot. That's just disastrous. You're just handcuffing yourself, because if you get an injury, you got more flexibility in the flex spot. Start them in your wide receiver spot. You've got yourself more room. I always
same for someone that plays, but for those that don't really quickly, why?
Yeah, your Wi-Fi keeps dropping out.
Awesome.
I would just say I'd echo that and say that I would say from there that don't ever play those players don't play first night players in your flex. Our advice to follow is set your team on Thursday for the week, but then be open-minded. Yeah, and do you know what? I also like to do this if you're a high-level strategy player, and the Americans call it playing possum. So I will sometimes, if I've got a rivalry, and I do this in home leagues quite a lot, I'll set a fake lineup.
Yeah.
And then I'll switch it.
Make them look like they're comfortable. I've done that.
Yeah. I do that in home leagues, especially against rivals, make them think, because again, we've talked about this, right? You might set a lineup a certain way because you look really comfy in
work when you forget to go back and do it though.
No, you've got to set the lineup back afterwards. But if you do, you're going to be in a good spot. I think I like that kind of approach. I think that's a good one. I think.
Well, we did. Yeah, we said about Brooke Cooks and Armin Ra being a higher play and a low play.
Yeah, so maybe you switch it up, put the low play in, then switch it to the high play. Maybe put the high play and switch to the low play. Kind of up to you, kind of what you want to do there. The other two bits of advice I'd give, especially to newer players, is one, just check your waiver wire, just see who's there, just have a rummage through, and check out your opponent's starting lineup and see what they've got in their squad. Maybe they're playing possibly you. See what's going on there. Don't take the projections. Like a new fantasy player or someone inexperienced will take the platform's projections like literally. And I tell you now, I've yet to meet a platform that is that good at projections, right? They're a good guide. Don't be afraid to start a player with a lower projected amount than a higher. I'll give you an example. I've got a lineup I was setting this morning where Diggs has a lower projection on NFL.com than Russell Gage. You explain to me how that is possible. Really? I'm going to start Russell Gage, and I like Russell Gage. I'm higher than Russell Gage about 99% of people, but I'm going to start him over Stephon Diggs. Like, are we? And by the way, it's not close. It's like by 1.2 points. It's ridiculous. I'm like, no, the projections are nonsense. They're a guide. They're nothing but a guide. Don't take them literally. Go with the players you feel are going to give you the best outcome. And second of all, have fun. Just have fun with it. It's what fantasy football is. We've waited 9 months to set a lineup.
On that note, just quickly, if I can, going back to Martin's question, Jalen Waddle comes in second if you look at projections.
There you go.
It's 15 for Cortland Sutton, 14 for Waddle, and 2 13s for Sutton and whoever else it was. Moore and the other one, Bateman.
So Sleeper agree with me. It's good to know. It's about the first time Sleeper and I.
No, they had Waddle second. We both had Waddle.
Oh yeah, but that's irrelevant. Yeah, but that's because they think he's going to play. He might play, but that's by the by.
Yep. Cool.
Cool.
So have fun, you were saying.
Yeah, just have fun with it. Just have fun. And do some trash talking and live it up a bit and have good fun. That's the other piece of advice I give you. But listen, I love shows like this. One of the people that asked the question in here, I think it was the first question we got, was Trader Tennessee. Yeah, he wrote a really nice message on Twitter earlier, which I retweeted. And he says he's been playing fantasy football since 1995. I just published a couple of articles on Substack. One's the waiver wire, similar to the podcast I did. Yep. The second one is 10 strategy points for in-season roster management. And he said he got more out of that article than other bits that he's read. And he's been playing for 30 years almost, and got a lot of insight out of it. And I don't think the strategy piece of the game is talked about enough. And I think that's where this pod is very, very different. If you're looking for a reason to tune in to this pod, and I think you've heard it over the last 70 minutes, Dan and I will look at this more from a game theory approach, like the way that Dan and I come to similar conclusions more often than not, because we think very similarly, which probably isn't great from a combative content perspective, but in terms of But the thing is, Dan
it is if the content is of value, Murf.
Well, that's it. And also, you and I will arrive at the same answer through different approaches. We have a lot of similar approaches. We're both conservative-natured players. We'll both look at opportunity. We'll both look at volume. But perhaps you and I will view certain situations differently, but still come to the same answer. And I think there's value in that, because there's more than one way to get to an answer, and there's more than one way to be right. And I think that's what's really key here is we're going to talk to you over the next 17 weeks about our processes, the processes in which we get to play. It'd be really easy for Dan and I to sit here over the next 17 weeks and just say, pick this player, pick this player, pick this player, pick this player. You learn nothing. Like, the whole point is you learn nothing. We want to give
Before
you
I got here, I listened and I'm a better player as a result of it. So maybe that's why we think the same. Maybe I've just had you in my ear for so many years.
That's a really shameful thought if that's true. I feel sorry for you, but I think the whole point is, we want to teach you how to do it. Right. we want to give you all the tools to do things the way you want to play the game, right? And the way that I play the game, the way Dan plays the game is slightly different, although also quite weirdly similar. But it might not be right. But we're still going to give you the way that we think so that you can build your own strategy. And that's the whole point of this show is it's going to be very strategy and theory based. But as a result, you're going to get a lot more out of it. So that's why you should tune in for the next 17, 18 weeks beyond. And we're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to do some
catch a man to fish or teach a man to fish, right?
Exactly that. That's how we're going to end it right there.
Right. Enjoy week one then. Football's upon us. Sit back, relax, set your lineups. Don't flex on a Thursday. Have fun is the last thing I think. Yeah. And
buy the fantasy playbook. We will be back, and thank you for everything. There's more pods coming. Dice to Guys tomorrow, DFS later in the week, Fast Action Friday. I'm going to come with some matchups podcasts as well later on in the week. So enjoy all of that, and don't forget, as always, keep rushing.